Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jen Hicks. I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach for Maine Woodland Owners. And today we have a very interesting program, a program we've never offered before called Considerations When Searching for Woodlands. We have definitely come across many people who have who found us well before they've actually purchased their woods. They would call our office asking questions, what they should be thinking about, talking about some land they saw, trying to get some advice. And we realized this is a really important topic. So we wanted to offer that an hour session by someone who has experience working with people who are purchasing land and then coming up with a plan for how they want to manage it. So today we have Joe Hutton. He is a forester with Prentice & Carlisle. He is in the Woodlot Management Services with Prentice & Carlisle. And I should mention that Prentice & Carlisle is actually our land manager for our land trusts. As an organization, we manage over 11,000 acres in the state of Maine. And in our land trust, in conservation, we manage it. They're managed forests. We harvest. We do all the best practices recommended for working forests, and we need help just like everybody else does. So we have enlisted the help of Prentice & Carlisle. So Joe is one of our foresters, and he's also very experienced working with woodland owners who, again, are in search or just purchased land or want to grow their kingdom, as they put it. This is a session also that's kicking off a series that's geared for new woodland owners or people new to woodland management. So I want to make sure everybody knows we will have more sessions similar to this. We actually going to have one each month over the next several months. The next one is going to be talking about the 10 things new woodland owners should know. And we have we have information on our website under our new woodland owner section of our website at mainewoodlandowners.org. It talks about the 10 things you should know. We're going to have Tom Doak, our executive director, providing that information and discussing those 10 things and helping people get their mindset on what their next steps are after deciding that they're going to start doing something with their woods. So today we'll talk about things you should think about when you're buying woods. Maybe even you'll get some information about what you should be thinking about now that you've bought woods. But I hope you will join us in April, and I'll tell you more at the end of this program, to continue the conversation. And then we will have other similar programs talking about the basics and some of the fundamentals about owning woods, managing woods, and enjoying your woods. Okay, all that said, I'm going to pass the torch over to Joe. A couple things. He's got a fantastic presentation. I'd like for him to go through his presentation, and at the end of the presentation, he's going to open it up for questions and answers. So he's going to create a nice chunk of time for that. I hope everybody brought their questions and thoughts. This is like I said, a participatory program, and I'd really like to make sure everybody gets a chance to get their questions answered and everybody can learn from each other. So at that, I will pass it over to Joe. Thank you, Joe, for joining us and your willingness to do this.
Thank you, Jen. Very glad to be here. Thanks to everyone who's joining us this evening. First, I'd like to apologize. My son shared a cold with me last week, and I'm on the recovery from that, but still a little congested and have a cough. So I'm sucking on a cough drop and I'll try my best not to blow anyone's ears out if I have a coughing fit. So my apologies there. As Jen mentioned, I'm a forester in the Woodlot Management Services Division at Prentice & Carlisle. I've been here for 2.5 years. Before that, I was a wildland firefighter with the National Park Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And before that, I was at UMaine doing my master's in forestry. And before that, I was at Weyerhaeuser in their North Carolina Timberlands Division, which is in eastern North Carolina and is exclusively loblolly pine plantations. I was there for 2 years. And before that, I was at Clemson University doing my bachelor's in forestry. So that's kind of a brief synopsis of my professional career so far. Maybe what you take away from that is I can't hold a steady job. I hope not, but so Jen was kind enough to walk me through sharing my screen, and hopefully I remember how to do this. Let's see, we'll go to that. So Jen asked me to kind of put a presentation together for folks who are, on the let's say the early stages of looking for and purchasing a woodlot. I'm trying to keep this to about 30 minutes, with an hour time total to give us a little bit of extra time for questions and answers. This might even be higher than a 30,000-foot view of things to consider. Again, working in the time constraints we have, each one of these topics really opens up the door to 10 more topics. So, like I say, we'll try to get a good look at a broad spectrum of challenges folks might face, and all the while being it known that there's much more to each one of these subjects than we'll delve into. At the end of the presentation, I've got my phone number and email in there. If anybody's got follow-up questions that we don't get to, or maybe you sleep on it tonight and have a question in the morning, feel free to reach out. I'd be glad to, converse with you digitally or over a voice call to help you in any way we can. And with that, I'm going to get started. I think Jen mentioned it, but I'll remind anyone who maybe just joined. I think we'd like to hold questions till the end just to try and help the folks who may watch this after the fact and recorded fashion to help their viewing experience. So I will get started, and we'll jump right into objectives. If you're doing a forest management plan or have been looking into any kind of forest management and in many facets of life, it's always beneficial to have objectives lined out. This is the purchase of new land is no exception to that. And I'm going to try and frame it a little bit of some typical approaches that I've seen from folks, both in what they're interested in and what their long-term management goals might be. A lot of folks are either looking to purchase a singular property, or maybe are inheriting a singular property that is family land, or some other gift, and that's all they're looking for. They've got their acreage, they've got their forest, maybe they've got their field, maybe they've got their house there. That's what they want. That's what they want to manage. Maybe they're looking to buy a camp lot, or a property that will ultimately become a hunting camp, or maybe have water frontage or what have you. But the takeaway, you're going to be in a single property. The alternative to that would be someone who maybe is looking to purchase a property or multiple properties, if possible, with the goal of adding acreage to that to expand either forest land, fields, whatever your objective there is. I've kind of a colloquial term I've heard there is kingdom building, and I've heard that term used is when lots are offered that are larger in size than most people typically would buy as an individual. So that's kind of those I'd say are a little bit less common than the folks who are looking to buy a lot and manage a lot. But it also could be one of those, you purchased a piece of land, but you've been there or owned it for X number of years, and you've known your neighbor and they're deciding to sell, and all of a sudden, well, maybe you're looking to expand your land. So we'll kind of try to get into some of those considerations for both. A little bit more time probably spent on the individual property. So, and I guess before I move off of this slide, I've got in that the other alternative, purchasing non-contiguous parcels. Maybe that's just on the other side of town. Maybe that's another county. Maybe that's the other end of the state. There are certainly challenges in and of themselves, just having that wider geographic range, especially when it comes to management, either by, yourself, the landowner, or, your forester, or preferred loggers that work in one area and not another. So that's another kind of consideration there. A little bit complicates things slightly. I'm sure most people have heard it. I've heard it, and I'm not in real estate. I've heard it plenty of times. Location, location, location. Really, where do you want to spend your time? And maybe where do you spend your time now? And how is a woodlot going to factor into that? If you're living a busy life, work, children, family, activities, what have you, do you want to have a woodlot that's 2 hours away? Maybe it's a beautiful piece of woods, but it's 2 hours away, which, just by your schedule, maybe that means you're only going to get there a few times a year. Maybe you're only going to get there for that week of hunting season you go up, or for, a week of snowmobiling. For some folks, that distance and ultimately lower frequency of visits may be acceptable to them. Other folks may want to be there every weekend, puttering away on a project, doing this or that. And for a lot of folks, proximity will drive that frequency of visiting. Um, the the shorter distance, the more likely you'll visit, the more likely you'll be there to observe changes in your woods, in your boundary lines, in your neighbors, what their activities are. So that can play a big factor. The other part as well that may play into all this, that first bullet's kind of speaking to your geographical relationship to a parcel. This next bullet point of towns is kind of speaking more towards what services are you looking for or need from this parcel. If this is going to be, your farmstead that you're going to buy, the old farmhouse, and it's got the back 40, of woods, or back 100, whatever you want to say, and you're going to bring your family there, your schools, are going to play into that. Maybe you're retiring here from somewhere else, out of state or different part of the state, knowing that as we all advance in age, there's usually more medical visits that are required. How far is the nearest hospital? How far is the nearest outpatient clinics, or maybe some specialty service that you need? Another one, so that's kind of a life picture. Taxes, death and taxes. All towns have them. Some have higher taxes than others. And I think I saw earlier in the chat that we've got some real estate folks in there, and they probably know better than me on this, but I'll give you my take. Some of the towns that have lower taxes, they usually have lower services associated with them. Some of the towns that have very high valued properties, let's say oceanfront on the coast, that are still have a significant amount of land inland that's not oceanfront, their tax rate may be higher based on some of the other demands of that community. The biggest tool that landowners have in the state of Maine to reduce their tax burden is the tree growth tax program. For those who don't know what that is, it's essentially, if you have a woodlot that is 10 acres or more of woods, you can enroll it in the tree growth tax program for a reduction of your tax burden. And that is something that, oh, does someone have a question? Oh, okay. And that's something that can be very helpful, especially on larger acreages, or in places that, maybe has seen a lot of development or increase in tax burden, for like family lands or old farmlands. There is a comparable program. I think it's open space, if I remember, for, farmlands, and that. I'm much less. In fact, I'm not knowledgeable at all on those things, or on those programs. Some other things that may be worth looking into. I think this is much less common, but I know this one for sure. The town of Bar Harbor has restrictions on harvesting, and the types of harvesting equipment you can use, and that that kind of restriction can be very limiting on your management tools as a landowner. So not that anyone's broadcasting these restrictions, but they do exist. I'd say they're extremely uncommon, but know that can be a challenge, especially if you buy this woodlot planning to purchase and or offset your purchase price, and then you find you can't conduct a harvest that you may have intended. We spoke of services already, so I won't belabor that point any further. So doing your research, do your homework. There's a lot of ways to find properties. Obviously, the internet is probably the single biggest one. Word of mouth is, of course, another big one. If you're kind of ingrained in a local community, or have roots in a community. So if you wanted to start, if you've kind of got an idea of maybe a neighbor or you know what parcel you own and you want to see what's around you, that maybe you can purchase if you're trying to expand your woodlot. Tax maps are a great tool for that. Towns have them in varying formats. Some are online in a downloadable PDF format. Some towns have it's actually a GIS, a Geographic Information Service, that has those the parcels, the shape of them, their location, and a lot of times the information of the landowner that owns them, that are online, pretty easy to use once you get in there. Some only have them in their offices that are only open 1 or 2 times a week for a certain number of hours a day. The Land Use Planning Commission, for the unincorporated or unorganized towns, I think I don't want to say because I'm not sure on it, but they have the vast majority of those parcels are available online, as well. So tax maps kind of will give you that spatial reference of here's some roads, here's some rivers, here's parcels around. You can see this is a subdivision, this is a bigger piece of farmland, so on and so forth. Deeds are the document that describes a parcel of land or parcels of land. A deed, this again is a pretty high level view of what a deed is, but it'll have when the parcel was purchased, who sold it, who bought it. It has a description usually of in some form. If you're lucky, it'll have, distances and record that there was a pin set, by a surveyor. What I most commonly run across, and I work in kind of mid-central, or southern central Maine mostly, you'll find that this property abuts, starting at the northern end, abuts so-and-so's property that runs along a rock wall to so-and-so else's property to an old birch tree, and then turns and follows a rock wall so-and-so distance, and it's very much trickier to find. And those are much more historic. They take a lot more on the ground research to kind of get those lines figured out, the property lines figured out. Critical thing, especially if your lot is not does not abut a public road, a maintained public road. Does this have a deeded right of way or an easement that allows you to access your property? And conversely, is the piece of or the parcel you're looking at, does it have a right of way or easement across it to someone else's property, either beyond you or that abuts you or some other scenario there? I've read a lot of deeds in my life, and they are not the easiest document to read. A lot of times I have to go through them 3 and 4 times to get the information I'm actually looking for. But that is a tool that you can have, to look and say, oh, this does say there's a pin here and it's this many feet, and it may allow you to have a rough idea Or if you're researching your own property, it may help you in finding your boundary lines, your corners, or, well, that neighbor is actually, that is not the line, even though he said that's where it is, or she said that's where it is. So we'll keep moving on. So I threw up a picture of a tax map. And you can kind of see this one's from the town of Charleston. It's on the Corinth. If you look on the bottom of the page or the bottom of that map, it's got Corinth written out, and on the right side of that page, it's got Bradford written out. And this is just a snapshot of a town in Maine. For those who don't know, this is probably 30 minutes northwest of Bangor. Generally, I would call this kind of farm country. But you see some of these parcels, most of these, geometric shapes. I don't think I see a single square, maybe a couple rectangles, and quite a few trapezoids. Will give you kind of an idea of, okay, how are these parceled up? And if you look, you can see some of these parcels. I don't have a cursor, sadly, but if you see, there's a little kind of a dashed line with two little squiggles on the end, or a squiggle on each end. Those show that parcel is connected to the other one, and it bridges that stream. So that's kind of something to keep in mind, and it shows. It's not a road. I think it's written on there. I can't quite tell. Oh, transmission line, it says. So that's a high tension power line. So you can get a lot of information from a tax map. It's got your road names, your rough intersections. Sometimes it'll show old discontinued town roads, which can be important for access. And most of them give you, at minimum, you'll have an idea of your map number and your parcel number, which will help you find the tax commitment book, which may help you find a name of a person if you're trying to get a hold of them and their mailing address, or search the deed for that property. So that's a quick rundown of a tax map. This is the kind of this is a tool, Google Earth, that I use quite heavily, and it's really for one feature alone, and it's the timeline feature. It's a pretty good little. It's free. Number one, you can download download the software onto your computer, or you can use it or an app, or you can use it through a browser if you'd rather go that route. But it has it'll aggregate satellite imagery. Most of it that I've found in Maine goes back to 1985. In 1985, it was pretty low. It was extremely low resolution. You can't really see much. Starting in the late 80s, early 90s, there's kind of imagery that will show you roads. You can certainly tell if something was harvested or not harvested, or the neighbors was harvested, so on and so forth. I use it a lot for harvest history. It can help you find old roads. It can help find old yards or old main skid trails. So it is dependent on the satellite imagery that A, was taken at that time, and B, is available for Google to crawl. There can be a lag of multiple years from when that last imagery was taken and had become available on Google. I've seen some 2020, I guess it'd be probably end of 23 or middle of 23 imagery up. Some stuff's not since 2018 or 21, which is kind of a schedule of a major mapping program in the U.S. So I've got a couple slides. The slides coming up are just to kind of highlight that timeline feature and some quick visual aids that you can get from that. So this is actually, I think I saw earlier when we started that someone's down in Surrey. This is actually in Surrey. I forget the road. I think it's 178 is a road that kind of is just off screen, but I kind of brought this up, and this is the interface on the software version that's downloaded to a computer. It's what I have on my computer. Most of this stuff on the left is not really important to you. 97% of what you're going to do in Google is going to be with your mouse scrolling in and out, moving around, moving the imagery around. So I've got it in bigger text there at the bottom of the slide, but this is from 2019. If you look in the top left of the panel of green, the actual imagery, you can see there's kind of a timeline there, and the indicator is at the furthest to the right, which is the most recent imagery, which is a showing of 9 of 2019. So, and the bottom left of that, you can see 1985. That's how far back it'll go. And like I said, that 1985 imagery is not really going to help a whole lot other than seeing that, yes, this is green, or not. So, looking at this, you see we've got some roads. If you look closely, you can see there's been harvesting done. There's little trails that spur off the road. Some of the bigger patches that are off these roads are log yards from a harvest. And looking, there's a lot of green there. It looks like a lot of trees. How hard could this have been cut? Well, so if you go, this is from 2004. And I chose this slide because it's such a contrast to the one from 2019. First of all, there's snow on the ground, right? So that makes a huge difference, giving that contrast. And you can really see how much harvest activity there's been. Now, granted, there's 10 years between this or well, 15 years, excuse me, between this and the slide I showed before. But, quite a different picture that this paints. You get a much better visual of the roads. If you give a road 15 years and don't use it actively, it's going to have grass growing on it, and it's probably going to have quite a bit of shade on it with crowns, crowding it if it wasn't really daylighted when it was used last. So this is kind of a real handy tool of that, but you still see that kind of in the center and down to the bottom, there's quite a bit there that doesn't look like it was harvested. So that might be one of those tools. Hey, look, let me go back a little further, as far back as this imagery will take me, and see, has this been harvested in the past imagery, since the imagery was put out? Or is this something that maybe was harvested 5 years before that and it just doesn't show up in 2004? So anyway, an interesting tool to use. I think it's fun to look at your own property and see, especially if you haven't owned it for that long, you see what the use history has been. Did the people before me have a bunch of junk in the yard that got cleaned up? So anyway, that's Google Earth. Again, free. I don't work for Google, but they could certainly donate to my cause if they'd like. So access, a little play on the location terms. For those not from Maine, I am not from Maine originally. I grew up in South Carolina. I've been here for, I think it's going on 12 years now. One of the favorite Maine sayings that I heard when I first moved up is "Can't get there from here." So I kind of like to play on that one because, maybe you do have a beautiful woodlot, but you can't get there. Is it landlocked? Number one, is the old town road that you used to use to access that washed out, discontinued, no longer passable? Has a beaver or beavers come and built a dam along the road, the woods road or gravel road that you use to access your property, and now it's washed it out and you can't go through there anymore? These are all big concerns, just for your own recreational use, and certainly for any sort of harvesting that you may be interested in doing. Maybe you don't want good access to your woodlot. Maybe this is intended to be a remote retreat that you can only get to via, an ATV, UTV, hiking in, driving in, some sort of off-road vehicle. If that's the case, that's fine. But I would caution anyone, certainly if you're planning to do a timber harvest, and certainly for resale, if that is an ultimate or potential outcome for this property, maybe you want it remote and hard to access, but the next buyer may not. So certainly a big consideration there. The other one, and this goes back to that deeds portion. Is there deeded, right of way easement access via a road to get to this property? If it's not in the deed, but maybe you've got a road going across these other people's property to get there, and it's been that way for as long as anyone can remember. Maybe that will continue to be viable, but it's much less certain. And as someone looking to purchase a property, that should be a very big yellow flag, I would say, at least, as far as whether or not you ultimately want to go through with this. Maybe you have the option to purchase a piece interior that the historic route goes across another land but does not have deeded right of way. Maybe you have the option to purchase a right of way or arrange some other exchange with that landowner to secure that access. So that's kind of the getting in that the access of a woodlot. Other considerations, if you're planning to come up in the wintertime and you're down a camp road, do they plow that road? Or are you going to need to bring up a snow sled or a UTV with tracks or ATV with tracks, or get someone to plow it before you come up in the wintertime? Is it a gravel road that, we're into mud season now in Maine? Is that road passable this time of year? And if not, if it is not passable, is that going to interfere with the recreation you were planning to do? If you've got a sugar bush up there, you're going to tap maple trees, and but you can't get up to your lot. That sugar bush is going to not do much good for you unless you've got some good strong legs and a good vacuum system, I guess, to bring that sap down to you. Some of the smaller towns, as they've seen budgets shrink or bridges wash out, let's say, they discontinue older town roads. They may still show up on tax maps. They may still be on the ground, but they're not being maintained. So, especially in the terms of a forest where you're looking to manage something for, in Maine, I would say, unless you've got a lot that's got pretty good wood on it, you're going to be looking to do improvements and manage this thing really routinely, with potential big, harvests at increments of 20 to 50 to 70 years, depending on your many factors. That road might be okay today, but is it going to be okay in 20 years? So that's kind of a bigger concern of the town road access, and that's going to bring us into the next slide, and this is more geared towards access from, let's say, a town road or the neighboring parcel. And this is I'm gonna speak a little bit more towards a woodlot as a standalone. This is actually a Maine woodland owner's property in Wynne, Maine, that I visited, which is, I guess it'd be northeast of Lincoln. I guess it's in the Penobscot River Valley. So a standalone woodlot that you're only going to be accessing for either timber harvesting or, maybe you're doing pre-commercial thinning, herbiciding, what have you, forest management stuff. That frequency of those activities is going to be much lower than if you're looking to go, again, you want a sugar bush to tap trees, you want to hunt in the fall, you want to go out there and tip trees for your wreaths in the late winter or early winter. All these activities dictate kind of access and your quality of access. This road that I've got a picture of here, there was a harvest done on that property, I'm assuming probably 15 years ago. This road is grassed in well, which is great. It's what I would kind of consider put to bed, so to speak, where you don't have erosion concerns. It's a pretty gradual gradient. It's got culverts that need to be maintained, though, and if they wash out, then you're washing your roadbed out, causes a whole lot of other problems. But roads and yards and access is probably the single biggest cost that I encounter with landowners, whether that's constructing a yard or road for the first time to access a woodlot that, you know, was either parceled up out of a bigger tract, or a rebuilding of a road that maybe was a historic, either tote road, you know, just for logging, or just an old, you know, old travel route that got washed out, wasn't maintained, you know, has some serious drainage issues essentially. Real big cost, you know, and it can eat up a lot of a stumpage revenue, or portion of stumpage revenue from any harvest. So I'm real big on maintenance. You know, that's a capital investment, that road. And if you just let it go, you're going to spend that money at some point, whether it's a little bit to maintain it slash visit it, maybe a little sweat equity, keeping culverts cleaned out and roads cut back. Or maybe that's, well, we're not going to do anything for 50 years in here. We're going to let this road go. Maybe we'll water bar it, you know, and just close it down, knowing that we're going to have to shell out X number of dollars per foot to fix it up and make it usable again. So I'm pretty big on roads just because of those two factors alone. And I've struggled on poor quality roads before, and it's really not good for anyone. Landowners, foresters, loggers, neighbors, you know, it's just can be a real bear, where otherwise it could be a blessing. So we're nearing the end here. I think this is might be my last slide, if not the last one. So there's hope, people. I'm going to go real quick into markets. This is a little bit more geared towards timber harvesting. And I guess to back up a little bit, this is going to go way back to earlier on in the slideshow of the tree growth tax program. The caveat of that program is that you are managing your woodlot for commercial forest products. Anyway, so you will be conducting a commercial harvest at some point on that lot. It doesn't have to be in the next 10-year period. It doesn't have to be in the next 50 years, but you have to be managing for that. So that's something that, you know, needs to be considered before you enroll in that program, and manage your woodlot accordingly. And this, so that was kind of the little spiel on that. Jumping back to markets, this little graphic here, I'm sure it's hard for folks to see, certainly if you're on an iPhone, or maybe even a tablet. It's the picture of the state, or it's a map of the state of Maine with the counties on there. And this shows the pulp mills that closed, I think, by historic pulp mills that were closed by 2015. This was the most up-to-date map I could find. I'm sure there's one that's more recent than that. But there's actually the J mill that's on there, blew up in 2022, so that's no more. The Old Town mill that's in there had some fits and starts, ran for a couple of years and shut down last year. So there are fewer and fewer mills. I use the pulp mills because they are a huge consumer of wood in the state. And frankly, a lot of forest management and harvesting, in my opinion, responsible harvesting, you're going to be taking a lot of those pulp quality and pulp species trees. That's your first removal. So if you don't have a good pulp market, that really hamstrings you on having the option to take some of those early successional, poor formed, stressed individuals out of a stand, to give your residual trees and stand a good boost, as far as growing and resources. So this is a bit of a trickier one. Again, I'm really glazing over a lot of things, but you know, there are big differences. I will say the northern part of the state, for those who don't know, that's very heavy to industrial forest land. If you can find land up there, number one, if you can find land up there that's big enough to be a woodlot, getting it harvested may or may not be a challenge. It's probably going to depend heavily on the road network and who's working in the area. But for a lot of the state, and certainly most of the population, there are mills that are scattered throughout. Again, this is just pulp mills. So there are many other types of mills that are located in many other places throughout the state. just a consideration there. If you're going to sell wood, who's cutting it for you? Who's the loggers? Are there loggers around there? Are you gonna what's your trucking, or how are you going to get it there? Will that be on a tractor trailer? Will that be on a wheeler truck, which is similar to a tractor trailer, other than that it carries less wood, but it can fit into tighter areas. They're less economical to drive for longer distances because they're carrying a smaller payload. That distance really dictates a lot on, is it even economical to haul a product to a mill? The other factors may be, do you have enough of a product that is of value that maybe even can subsidize some of these less valuable products, but trying to do sound silviculture, no, you need to remove those. So anyway, these are just kind of some further considerations, again, more geared towards that, if you are going to do a harvest, knowing that that is a big silvicultural tool at people's disposal, that usually pays for itself. I mean, yeah, usually pays for itself. There are pretty few cases when it doesn't, because most folks wouldn't want to do it. So anyway, that's kind of the short on the markets. And they're constantly changing. COVID saw some crazy times, crazy prices. Those markets have come down. They've come down. They've gone back up. They've come back down. So it's a dynamic thing. Some of these folks people may have bought a woodlot right next to the old town mill, thinking, "Oh, that'll be there. It's a good pulp mill. It'll be there forever." Well, it's nothing is forever, I guess. So just some considerations there. All right, it's finally over. Just closing notes, like I said earlier, if you've got more questions or anything that I didn't cover here, please feel free to reach out. That's my email address and cell phone number. I get back to folks as quickly as I can. It's mud season, so now is I find myself in the office more than usual. But thanks, and with that, Jen, I'll turn it back over to you and stop sharing my screen.
We do have some questions in the chat. We'll start
yeah.
with that. And then I'd invite anybody who had a question to unmute themselves and jump in and ask your question. But let me start with this first one. The difference between the timbered image in 2005 and the 2019 image is remarkable. How would the money, the financial value of the land change with 15 years growth?
So that the short answer, and I heard this from Bob Seymour, who, if any of you folks are members and read any of his columns, I took a class from Bob and did my master's when he was still there. And the answer is it depends. It depends on a lot of things. Number one is probably the pre-harvest. What was there? Right? What kind of stocking was there? Both species, size, height is a big one. So that's before that, let's say a cut in 2007. Let's say they cut it, just to play a hypothetical game here. And they cut it in 2007. Did they go through and cut out the early successional species, lower value stuff? Maybe they thinned some of your desirable species to space the other ones, do kind of sound, responsible management. Or was it more of a, we're looking for a financial return here. We're going to cut the best and leave the rest. High grading is a term commonly used for that. So a lot depends on that harvest history. Now, 15 years, just as a general rule of thumb, again, assuming that a lot was not absolutely hammered and that they did leave good growing stock and that it's a decent, what they call site quality. I don't know if folks are familiar with that term, but that's essentially the ability of a forest or the soil really to grow a forest and how quickly. And higher site or higher quality sites will regrow and grow timber faster than lower quality sites. So that again, that's a very 30,000 foot view of that subject. How would the value change within 15 years? I would say it'd be worth considering looking at again. Generally after a harvest, again, so much of that depends on the harvest removals. 15-year, I'll give you a for instance, just because I had this happen, or I did this with a woodlot this winter. We had harvested on that woodlot 15 years prior, and the landowner she's selling it and was wondering and if they could do another harvest. She was looking to generate a little revenue, but still be responsible about cutting it. I walked it. This property is what I would consider a high site. It's old farmland. It was pretty well stocked with relatively quick growing species, very heavy to northern red oak. That was decently formed, and they had in previous harvests had left quite a bit of white pine that was of, I would say, mature size. So, we went through and did another thinning. That they had done an excellent job of removing the early successional species out of that sand, i.e., aspen or popple, more commonly known in Maine, and fir. We scared up a little bit more of that they had missed, and then we thinned a lot of the residual hardwood stands with that were oak. We did a crown thinning, trying to space those crowns of our retained trees that are of the best form to encourage their growth and diameter growth especially. And that woodlot generated income for her. I would say we probably removed maybe 50% of the volume in the areas that we actually entered. We did not cover the whole woodlot because some of it wasn't stocked well. Again, so much of that question goes back into what did you start with? How has it been managed for those past few years? I'd hesitate to give a dollar value just because there are so many factors. I'm sorry, I didn't really answer your question, David, but those are just some of the factors that play into it.
There's another question, for smaller woodlot owners, can you look for loggers that harvest with smaller equipment to keep costs of roads down and maybe increase harvest yield?
So, where I gotta find it. For small, okay. Can I look for loggers that harvest with smaller equipment? Keep costs of roads down. So road costs, a kind of simple way to think of it would be in dollars per foot. If you need 500 feet of road to get to your wood yard because your property is on a public road that's steep right at the road and you have to, switch back to get up to it, that's going to be quite a bit more expensive than someone who can have a road or a yard that is, the trucks can back in off the public road. Smaller equipment, what I would say the difference between that you're going to get with smaller equipment, the truck, a lot of times the log truck is what does a lot of dictating of what size yard you need and or turnaround. A tractor trailer needs, let's say a 40-foot at least, and this kind of goes into the road it's backing off of, 40-foot wide entrance at the edge of the road, probably more like 45. And that kind of shaped as like the bottom of an eye and comes up and gets narrower. And so that's just your entrance. That you can't get around that. What I would call a wheeler truck or a straight truck, that is not a tractor trailer. It's just the cab of a truck, a straight frame, axles, and a crane to load itself. You don't need much more than a pickup truck, really, or obviously that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but they can wiggle around much tighter turns and back into maybe a driveway. The trick of that is they are less cost effective, as I mentioned earlier. They haul, let's say, maybe 2/3 of what a tractor trailer may haul or less. So that savings on the road may not be borne out depending on the distance that the wood has to be transported. Again, it's a lot of pieces in this puzzle. So that's the truck side of it. As far as equipment, so, I guess if you want to throw horse logging in there, you can throw that in. I've never worked with horse logging. I've seen it in demonstration, so I'm not going to speak to that at all. Your other options would be what most folks would call traditional, or a hand crew, or a tree length system, which is, a chainsaw, or someone cutting with a saw. They're limbing in the woods, dragging the tree, one long piece of tree out to the yard, and processing it into its different products at the yard. That takes yard space lengthwise, because you are pulling that whole stem out and then cutting it, and you've got to have room for, you cut off your hardwood pulp sort. Let's say we'll do a saw log tree, hardwood pulp. In the middle, maybe you've got firewood or pallet wood, and at the butt, you've got a saw log. So then you've got three sorts, which then have to be spread out a little more. So that yard becomes really long.
So I'm gonna jump in here. That sounds like we're getting into a rabbit hole here. I want to make sure
We are going into
we
a
have
rabbit hole.
4 minutes left. I want to make sure.
Okay.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but again, Joe's available for these kinds of conversations. Bill Worry posted that this was very practical. It's a good start. There's also free resources for people who want to, start getting into the woods but aren't ready to hire the, or the considerations can be assessed by hiring a local Maine forester to walk the land with you and give you professional sense of his possibilities and limitations. One question I've heard is, when do you bring in the forester? Joe, I think you mentioned it in your presentation, or maybe not, but just to reiterate, when it's time to really bring in the professional, forestry professional person.
Jim and I kind of have spoken at length about this, and
Yeah.
I've walked woodlots with folks who are, walked woodlots with their real estate agent themselves and the current landowner to kind of evaluate them and just get a take on it. I wouldn't say that's common. Not to say you couldn't. Foresters are busy folks, so finding one that's got time in their schedule may be, first of all, maybe seasonally variable, and second of all, depend on the number of foresters in the area, or that you may be willing to have travel. Some of that's gonna, everyone has to make a living. If you're going to go look at 20 woodlots with a forester, that's going to take days and days of their time, there will be a cost associated with that. And so that I would say, if it were me, I would suggest on having a lot of your questions already answered before you go calling a forester. Number one, what's the area you want to be in? What is, do you have a rough idea of size? What's your management time frame? Is this something you want to manage yourself? And you're 50 years old, you're probably not going to be making management decisions or harvests when you're 120. Maybe it's something your kids are going to be managing. So there's a lot of factors that you can sort out on the front end to make the most of their time. And walking with a forester, if nothing else, maybe you go a few times with them and kind of, let's say, calibrate your eye for, well, this is kind of this type of forest. These are these species. Maybe you'll pick up some tree species. Maybe, here's some considerations you shouldn't, this should rule these properties out. Maybe these are the things you want to look for in a property. So, having again, this is kind of 30,000 foot view, having a good relationship with a forester and a real estate agent, whether they are the same person or two people working together, is only going to help you make a better decision. Did we have some other questions, Jen? I don't mind going over if we need to.
Yeah, we can go if people want to stay for a few extra minutes. It's fine with me. Anybody want to jump in with a question? I know that there's some people who have a real estate background that have been on this program or joining us on this program as well. So it's there are people out there. I know that John Colina, I don't know, I haven't met you, but sounds like you have some experience. But does anybody have any questions to ask Joe while you're here? You can just unmute yourself and jump in.
Jen, I would say too, I see Jim Nash asked a question about Maine DOT permit for access road driveway.
Okay, great.
That's a quick one. It's permit by rule. You do have to apply. In my experience, the Maine DOT has been good to work with. They will work with you to try and, they may say, no, we shouldn't put this here because it's in a curve or a hill. We need to put it over here, but they will work with you. And those applications are, I'm fairly certain, available online through their website. If not, if you just give your regional branch a call, they'll be able to set you up with the person who oversees the roads for them.
Yeah, I just had a couple of comments. First off, thanks to Jen and Maine Woodland owners. What a great idea. And Joe and all the folks at PNC are just quality folks over there for sure. So, yeah, I don't know if anybody, I'm sure folks noticed a couple of my comments there, but yeah, I'm a licensed forester too with American Forest Management and AFM. I'm the designated broker with AFM Real Estate. So I offer both of those services all in one. So it's pretty handy. Joe made a bunch of great points. One thing I always like to say about land is it's so tangible. It's an investment that you can touch and feel and taste and work with and get a return out of it in some cases. So I think that's why anyone involved with this organization understands that. But I always point all my buyers to Maine Woodlands and to find them because you guys do just a great job. But one other thing was that you mentioned a lot about tree growth. The tax bulletin number 19 is what you want to look up for the tree growth stuff. It's really it's a great little summary of what it's all about. Tax bulletin number 19. And then a couple other notes. Just remember, everything is based on your objectives as landowners. Whatever your objectives are, that's what you want to help. That's what you want to work with. But just a couple quick comments there. I kind of scattered around, but just a couple comments. So
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe,
Sure.
early on in your presentation, you mentioned changes in boundary lines. Why would they change?
I'm not sure. So I don't remember mentioning changes in boundary lines. What I was referring, now I will say they do change. They can change, especially if you're if you're getting land surveyed for the first time. Rock walls look straight, let's say, but then a surveyor goes and measures them, and they may not be straight. You know what I mean? Or different. There's a lot of different factors there, and I'm not going to get too far into it. Having knowledge of your boundary lines as a landowner, period, in my opinion, is a good place to start from. And really, that's a question, especially if you're looking to purchase a woodlot, are the boundary lines clearly marked? Is there I would say, and I'm not a real estate agent, so I really can't speak to it, but most of the woodlots I work on, there's not a search. It's, finding that old evidence, old blazed trees, old rock walls, reading deeds, that sort of thing. So just going off of, well, this is where we think it is, that's fine, but that can also get you into trouble or other people into trouble.
Are paper company markers considered reliable as far as delineating corners and whatnot?
As in like a iron pin with a cap on the top that's
actually they're wooden posts with the paper company's logo carved into it.
Oh yeah, sure. Yes, that's as good, as good as any. Again, without an actual survey, it's, you could be proven wrong, but at the same time, what are the circumstances where you're going to have a survey and that sort of thing is going to happen? I'm pretty unlikely.
Those typically what I've heard from the many surveyors I've talked to, that on ground evidence they're going to hold. That's usually held is the right evidence and such. But of all the transactions I've done, a lot of them do not come with the survey. People buy it based on the deed. It's the way it goes sometimes, and it's fine. It's more than fine. And if you ever need to do a boundary line agreement with the neighbor, that happens all the time too. So.
Yeah, that's a good point, John. Boundary line agreements, road use agreements, a lot of folks are pretty agreeable, aside from, some folks aren't, but I've found that to be a very small minority. I did want to say, I see John Machulis asked a question. How do I think about softwood to hardwood ratio and proximity to mills, i.e. in one county, you might prefer softwood stands versus hardwood based on mills, which are in close proximity? Yes, is the answer. You can consider it. A lot of the pulp mills buy both hardwood and softwood. With the exception, when I say softwood, I'm speaking of spruce and fir pulp. Hemlock and pine pulp, to a much lesser extent. Excuse me, my cough drop's worn off. I would I prefer, so I would pick the woodlot that speaks to me the most, frankly. If it was, you're gonna have those pulp products no matter what. If you're buying a lot of hardwood pulp, or a woodlot or a parcel, let's say, that is all hardwood pulp, that's going to be it's going to help you to be a little more proximal to the mill, generally speaking. Again, I wouldn't get too hung up with it. For one reason, there's just not that many pulp mills around. There's not that much land around them that's available. It's kind of might be a perk, let's say. Now, if you are buying a white pine lot and you happen to be within sight of the Robbins Lumber Mill in Searsmont, that's probably going to help you. But chances are someone knows what they've got and they're not selling it, or they're going to cut it and sell it. That's that's a tricky question. That's something we work with all the time, is just marketing of wood. It's every wood lot, every job is different. So not hard to overcome, just something to kind of consider.
Joe, this is Bill Wary. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good. Another consideration is the permitting process for conducting a harvest, and the variability depending upon who is the CEO in a town of what is and is not permissible. And checking this out in advance and what the history there is, what the procedures are, but it can be very complex and variable, as you know.
That's a good point, Bill. And I usually, especially if I'm doing any kind of road work on a public road, whether that's town and certainly if it's state, just giving the folks there a heads up what you're doing in advance is only going to help you. If you are a woodlot owner that is, I'm fixing up my driveway, or I'm putting in a log yard, or I'm putting in a road that will become a log yard, just having a conversation with the town folk will a lot of times help you in the end. And chances are, especially if you're new to an area, they may be able to help point you in the right direction of other resources.
Thank you.
Anybody got anything else? Someone asked when mud season was and the age of climate change. Well, I can tell you it's right now. I'm not sure when it'll be next year. I think that seems like, is Jen still on?
Oh, sorry, I
Nope,
muted
there's
myself.
Jen.
Wasn't it mud season all summer too?
It's been a year of mud season.
Yeah.
Feels like.
So I just want to do a quick reminder. We're actually having our next online program with Tom Doak in April, on April 23rd. It's a Tuesday at 5 p.m. We're going to have an hour-long program on the 10 things new woodland owners should know. I'm going to share my screen with this lovely flyer that we have here. This is the 10 things. You'll find it on our new woodland owner page on our website. These are kind of words of wisdom, and to make sure that you are thinking about all the things that matter before you get yourself too wrapped up with some of the real nitty-gritty details of managing your woods, you know, making sure that you are thinking about what's important. So Tom's going to go through those 10 things, and then we're going to have programs based on each of those 10 things throughout the year. So I hope you will stick with us on your new woodland ownership journey and use us as a resource. And please be in touch at mainwoodlandowners.org. Also, if you're not a member, please consider being a member of Maine Woodland Owners. You'll find information on our website at mainwoodlandowners.org. But reach out to me as well. I love hearing from all of our members and people who are not members, but are friends and like us anyway. So I hope everyone has a great night, and we'll see you again soon here online and in person. So thank you for attending. Have a great night.
Thank you, Jen.
Bye, Joe. Thank you.